I thought I'd first ask if there's anyone here who's looking into the UFO phenomenon for the first time. You're venturing into it, just checking it out for the first time. Okay. So we have a room of UFO veterans, troopers, the ones who haven't given up, the ones who haven't quit, the ones who for some reason, however irrational that reason may be, are still connected to this phenomenon in some way. I say this because I know there are a lot of people in the world today who feel that kind of connection, who have some kind of innate sense that this phenomenon is connected to who they are and why they're here in the world at this time. Now, some people are drawn to this mysterious subject because of its intriguing nature. And other people are drawn to it because something has happened to them in their life that has changed their life. A sighting, an encounter, or some other kind of inexplicable experience has enabled them to cross the threshold, to pass through the veil of ridicule that's been cast over this country, certainly for the last 60 years. To venture into unknown territory, or territory that's not commonly traveled. So today, I would like to speak to this innate sense in all of us as we try to understand what this is, as we try to come to terms with why it is important to us, why for some of us we can't seem to live a, quote, normal life, and this is part of the reason why. And while there are many other things to do on a Saturday afternoon, we would choose to come here and sit together in a hot room and try to crack the shell. Try to dig a little deeper. Get a little more penetration. And I'm speaking now particularly to the UFO veterans who I think really need to get some penetration, because after a while, okay, UFOs are real. Then what? What comes next? So my presentation today is not about UFOs are real. My presentation today is about looking at the questions that come next. I really want to acknowledge MUFON for the excellent work they have done in opening the gate, in providing a forum, in gathering data. It's been furthered by some very courageous and dedicated people. And they have gotten us to this point of, okay, UFOs are real. And there are some people who are still skeptical. But we have to ask ourselves, at what point does skepticism end and denial begin? Because after a while, you have to accept certain things about life. If life shows you something and it was unexpected or something you didn't want, you can keep denying it or questioning it, but it doesn't go away. UFO phenomenon does not go away. It's not going to go away for you. You can try to go away from it, but somehow something keeps pulling you back. And at any given moment, that may feel like a good thing or a bad thing, but it's still there because it's real, and you've been touched by it. My work as a spiritual teacher over the last 30 years has brought me into this arena quite unexpectedly. 30 years ago, I left my job as a special educator for the blind. Still kind of a special educator for the blind. And cast me in a direction that I wasn't planning to go, and prepared me for something later in life that would have a dramatic impact upon me that has to do with our subject for today. As a meditation teacher, as a teacher of inner guidance, I began to open doors within myself and encouraging other people to open doors within themselves that perhaps have never been opened or even considered. Because my understanding and my belief is that every one of us possesses much more knowledge than we're aware of. It's not just the unused part of our brain that the scientists like to talk about, the other 90% or the 95%. We actually viscerally know things because we are people of this world. Just like your cat or your dog or all the animals in your sphere, all of creation knows certain things about being here. We too know certain things about being here. So when you begin to tap this core of knowledge, this is not book learning, this is not the product of your early education or your parents or anything like that. This is a kind of core knowledge. When you begin to tap that, some very unexpected things happen. And you start to find that you begin to know or sense things that other people are not knowing and sensing. And if you try to tell them about what you're experiencing, they either don't get it or they don't want to get it. I don't want to go there. How many of you had tried to talk about the UFO phenomenon with other people and have them just not want to go there? Right, like everybody. Don't want to open that door. Want to keep my life understandable. Want to feel safe and comfortable. Don't want to go there. But going there is what it's all about. Because if UFOs are real, then this is the biggest phenomenon in human history. The phenomenon that can change our life and destiny more than anything else. More than all the headline news, more than the presidential campaigns or the presidents themselves. And the bigness of that you can feel. And it takes a lot of courage to feel that when no one else around you is. So I commend you for hanging in. It's a tough journey in that respect. You don't get a lot of kudos from the culture that you're into UFOs. You're like a UFO buff or something worse. Yeah. In 1983, I had an experience that changed my life. And it was the product of this inner digging or research. This sense that there's more to know that's at the core. And while everyone else seems to be living at the surface, there's something at the core that's really important, that has to be plumbed and experienced. And somehow I tripped a wire or threw a switch or did something that brought into my life a very powerful presence that was unlike anything I had read about, heard about, or knew about. And it was very upsetting to me because I thought I really had heard about a lot and knew about a lot. And what this began to reveal to me as I opened myself to it, which I did rather reluctantly at the outset, was the idea or the understanding that we are at the threshold of emerging into a greater community of intelligent life. We have reached a point in our evolution where this is going to happen. It's going to happen whether we're ready or not, whether we want it to or not. It's going to happen. It is happening. It's been happening. And somehow, those of us who have been queued up to it are going to be the first responders. And the first responders, like pioneers, have a tough job of breaking ground. You don't get to follow the crowd now. You don't get to have a big consensus. You know, we want to say yes to something because everyone else is saying yes to something. Well, in this case, you can't do that because not a lot of people are even aware of this. And the ones who are don't want to deal with it, or perhaps have fanciful notions that, you know, we're entering the magic kingdom or something like that. But the reality is much more sober and much more grave and much more significant and, in its own way, much more promising. This experience prepared me for a contact that I would have 4 years later. And I'm going to talk about this contact. I can't ask you to believe it because it's something that was preeminent for me. But I'm most concerned that you consider the outcome of this contact. Just like I cannot really comment on your contact experiences, I can only look at the results. So I ask you today to consider the results of this contact experience with a small group of individuals called the Allies of Humanity. In 1997, I still didn't want to have anything to do with the UFO community or this whole subject, for the same reason that most people don't, because it's enigmatic, it's troubling, it's engrossing, and it's full of conflict. Everybody's got their notion of what it is and what it's about, and there's a lot of conflict. It's contentious. It's not an easy environment to be in necessarily. You have to deal with big questions for which you don't have answers, and most people just don't want to do that. They like to deal with little questions for which they've been given answers, or they have answers. So in 1997, this immensely beneficent spiritual presence asked me to receive this contact, which I did rather reluctantly. I received then a series of 3 briefings. 12 months later, I received another 3 briefings. During this interval, I personally struggled with what this was because it was completely new to me. It was not a result of my thinking or philosophy. I hadn't put this together. It was very original for me. And yet I was asked to represent this or share this material with other people, which means that I would have to stake my claim, my reputation, of which I had some, upon this material. You don't just receive this kind of stuff and just put it away for the next 20 years. And in a minute I'll show you why when I begin to talk about it. So I sat with it for months and months and months, asking myself, what is this going to mean for me? Very self-centered question. Concerned about me. What's this going to mean for me? People in spirituality aren't going to like this because it's way too real. People in the UFO community aren't going to like this because it takes away the mystery. And a lot of people are feeding off the mystery. You know, mystery is a comfort as well as a challenge, you know. Seek but do not find. I mean, if it's always mysterious, you're always looking. But when you find, you have a whole different challenge. It's like looking for your true partner in life, right? You look and you look and you look and then you find it's like, oh my God, commitment. I've got to be committed. Marriage, kids, responsibility. So sometimes the searching is a lot easier than the finding. And very true in this situation, because when you really start to crack the nut, what you find isn't an easy thing. But when you find it, it's a good thing because it resonates with your soul. Your soul doesn't care about the data and the information. That's for your mind. Your soul is looking for the connection, where the plug goes in the wall, where the current flows through you, where you begin to feel vital energy and inspiration. Now, if plugging that cord into the wall shows you things you don't want to see, or points your life in another direction, well, that's a conflict. But your soul is still going to be illuminated by it. Because your soul is looking for the connection. We may be looking for answers up here, but I'm telling you, the answers are booby prizes. Answers are for people who don't find. Remember the game shows, you know, when you're kids, you know, the guy who won $10 million and the other one gets a little envelope, you know, for a free shoes or something like that. That's like the answer. We've already got answers. How many answers do you need? We have answers for God. We have answers for nature. We have answers for love. We have answers for relationships. We have answers for who we are. We have answers for what life is. But you know, if you're not connected, it is a booby prize. So you need more answers. I was recently interviewed. I do some radio, and I was recently interviewed by a host who asked me, isn't this UFO phenomenon an incredible mystery? And I responded to her and I said, this is not a mystery. This is a reality for which we don't yet have all the pieces. Now, why isn't it a mystery? Mysteries are things you can't answer with answers, like who you are and where you all came from and what your destiny is beyond this life and who sent you into the world. That's a mystery. Mysteries are things you can't answer with answers. This UFO phenomenon is not a mystery. Some people want to keep it a mystery. Well, we'll never really understand, and they're way beyond us. We'll never comprehend them. It's nonsense. That seek but do not find. We just need the missing pieces. We need to put this puzzle together. Okay? Puzzle is not a mystery. It's just a puzzle. So, to put that puzzle together, we have to go beyond the first question. The first question is, what is happening? And today I'm going to talk about 4 questions. The first one is, what is happening? Okay, we've done a lot of research on what is happening. Well, somebody's flying around up there in craft that we don't own, doing a lot of amazing stuff, and there's a lot of strange events happening around these craft. And people are being impacted and affected, and it ain't us. Or it's not us that we know. And that's been interpreted at a psychological level, a metaphysical level, a spiritual level, a physical, pragmatic level. For me, the first question has been answered. 50 years of UFO research. Okay, somebody from off-planet is here, flying around, interfering in human affairs. I'm fine with that. I don't keep having to go back to the first question, because there are 3 other questions that are more important than the first question. These are the questions where people either won't go or can't go. 4 questions are, what is happening? Why is it happening? What does it mean? And how do we prepare? What is happening? Why is it happening? What does it mean? And how can we prepare? Now, the second question is broad range of speculation about why it's happening. The third question, what does it mean? Broad range of speculation. Fourth question, nobody has a clue. Somebody's been in our airspace for 50 years, operating without our consent, interfering in human affairs, violating our trust, and we don't have a clue what to do about it. Now that's a problem. I think that's a problem. You know, and I value UFO research. But somehow, and it's very important for people new to this phenomenon, but for all you UFO veterans out there, we got to move on. Okay, UFO are real. I get it. I get it. More sightings, more sightings. Okay, I get it. I get it. It's like, you know, what's the next piece of music that goes with this? And I think there's some missing pieces here. There's several missing pieces. And they're missing for very important reasons. This morning you heard a lot about the government. Government cover-up, the nefarious deeds of the government, which are very real and very confusing, in some ways enigmatic. As long as we're 50 years behind UFO reality, they don't care what you know. So we can look at Roswell forever, but that's a long time ago. Lots happened since then. Another missing piece. We don't know who they are and what they're doing here. So while there's this obsession with the government, and I think that the government is a piece, a big piece, but who the hell are the aliens? What are they doing here? What are their strengths and weaknesses? What compels them to be here? That's a missing piece. We can't answer that piece. Well, they're here to help us. They're here to uplift us. They need our spirituality. I operate in spiritual circles, so I'm giving you some of the things that I've been hearing over the years. They need to learn to love. They've lost their souls, so they're coming to earth. Sounds nice. That's a missing piece. Who are we in relationship to them? Another missing piece. What do they have that we don't have? Missing piece. What do we have that they don't have? Missing piece. How can you get a clear picture when you've got these big missing pieces? You have UFO fact, and then the rest is like whatever you want it to be. And that is a weird place to be. So when people ask, why did this allies material come into being? Why? My understanding is that it came to be because we needed the missing pieces. And we need to get a clear picture about what this is. Because we cannot spend any more time, particularly for you UFO veterans, kicking the tires and saying UFOs are real. If we want to go anywhere with this, we got to go beyond the first question and start dealing with the other three, which are very tough. And those are the kinds of questions that science cannot answer or will not answer. Try to get anybody to do public scientific UFO research? Not now. Real science, I mean, very difficult. There are people who have read the Allies of Humanity who are science say, I could never talk about this where I work. Ever. I'd be blacklisted. Ever. So that's a conservative reality with its own rules and its own prohibitions. I'd like to read to you the back of the Allies book to try to answer the first question about who are the Allies. This is a quote right on the back cover. Over 12 years ago, a group of individuals from several different worlds gathered at a discrete location in our solar system near the Earth for the purpose of observing the alien visitation that is occurring here. From their hidden vantage point, they were able to determine the identity, organization, and intentions of those visiting our world and monitor the visitors' activities. This group of observers call themselves the Allies of Humanity. This is their report. Within this book, there are 6 briefings, actually 5 briefings, and then a question and answer. The first 3 briefings were given in, I think, December of 1997. The second 3 were given a year later. I'd just like to read you the headings of these, and then I'm going to talk about what they really say. The first briefing is the extraterrestrial presence in the world today. The second is the challenge to human freedom. The third, a great warning. I actually gave these titles because there was no titles to the briefing, so I had to find myself. Fourth briefing, manipulation of religious traditions and beliefs. Fifth briefing, threshold, a new promise for humanity. And the sixth briefing, questions and answers. What the Allies of Humanity describe is very simple and not easy to deal with. They say what you're encountering is an intervention into your world, an intervention of sort of classic proportions. They emphasize that what you know in the world, the reality of your life in the world, is very much like the reality of life beyond the world, except obviously in a vast and immense sphere. And this correlates to a recent scientific theory called the theory of mediocrity. Some of you might know what that is. Theory of mediocrity is gaining a lot of strength now because they've discovered other planetary systems that they believe are very similar to our own or could harbor a world like our own. They're seeing large gas planets like Jupiter and so forth. And so the theory of mediocrity is gaining a lot of momentum now. And basically it says that what we have here in life on Earth is a microcosm of life in the universe. And all life, no matter how different or strange or how it might be configured, follows certain basic laws that we know here. So life in the universe is knowable, even if we can't discern its form or its culture or its intelligence. It's still governed by the laws of nature. That's good because that takes away the part of the enigma of extraterrestrial intelligence. Some people say, well, you'll never fathom it, it's unfathomable. It's not true. It's not true. You can tune into plants, you can tune into porpoises, you can tune in to your cat at home. It's a pretty different animal than you are. probably more different than you, than the extraterrestrial, who has technology and perhaps verbally communicates or telepathically communicates. And, you know, your cat is pretty different from you, but you can get in sync with your cat, okay? We have the capacity to have this kind of insight. Who is intervening? The Allies describe them as collectives. This is their word, not mine. A collective is a hierarchical organization made up of many different races of being, whose primary focus and interest is resource acquisition. And that their strength here physically is not very great, and they don't possess many weapons. They're not an armed force, basically. They're a force of resource explorers, and that is why they're here. So I'd like to read you now a couple of quotes from the Allies of Humanity. In the realities of the greater community being life in the universe, particularly intelligent life in the universe, in the realities of greater community travel and exploration, emerging races such as your own will, almost without exception, encounter resource explorers, collectives, and those seeking advantages for themselves as their first encounter with greater community life. Your visitors do not come armed with great weapons or with armies or armadas of vessels. They come in relatively small groups, but they possess considerable skill in influencing people. This represents a more sophisticated and mature use of power in the greater community. So, basically they say forget your Star Wars phenomenon of blasting each other out of the universe. He says that rarely ever happens. The technology is easily copied, acquired, or stolen. The real advantages in the universe is in the realm of intelligence, skill, influence, and what's called the mental environment. Think about that for a minute. What's the ultimate weapon in a conflict or in a competition? The ultimate weapon. This is how Sun Tzu described it in The Art of War. It's kind of a foreboding title, but it actually talks about some of the important lessons of life. He says, the best policy is to use strategy, influence, and the trend of events to cause the adversary to submit willingly. So what the Allies are telling us in terms of what is happening is that we are being visited by resource explorers who are highly organized, though their forces are small. They rely upon the powers of persuasion and human acquiescence, or human ignorance, in order to achieve their goal of persuasion. And what is their goal? Why don't they just come in and take over the place? First, they don't have the power to do it. Second, they want to preserve the environment because the environment here is the most important thing. That worlds such as our own are rare in the universe, according to the Allies of Humanity. Terrestrial planets, we have this kind of biological diversity. Boy, this is like Tahiti, okay? And that most colonized worlds have been colonized through a technology and are very devoid and barren. They may have certain kinds of resources, but we're sitting on a prize. Why now? Why are they here now? According to the Allies of Humanity, they're here because we have built the infrastructure they can use. We have built a sufficient technology that can merge with theirs. We have total control of the planet, almost total control. And we can extract resources very easily, or with greater ease than we ever could before. If they'd shown up 100 years ago, well, there's no usable technology here, so, they don't want to have to build their own. Why not just let us do all the work for them? And then they can begin to use it for themselves. Now, some people think this is a spiritual, cosmic, metaphysical event. And you can interpret it like that in some very self-comforting ways, okay? And it feels really good to do that, by the way. I mean, that's how I looked at it at the beginning. I thought, I'm so sick of human behavior. Bring them on. We need a better menu. We need a better way. And hey, if they've got advanced technology following Drake's Law, they've outgrown conflict. They haven't destroyed themselves. They're probably really cool. And if they're like us, somehow that would be kind of disappointing, Like the Jetsons showing up, Wouldn't that be kind of a letdown? It's George Jetson and his kids. But this is a natural event. This is how the Allies describe it. This is an event of nature called competition for environment. We know about this law of nature. We don't often think about it in our sort of protected human suburban lifestyle in America, but in reality, everywhere you go, there's competition for environment and there's competition for resources. And it's just part of life. It's a difficult part of life, but it's part of life. And that reality is governing reality out there. Advanced technology, according to the Allies of humanity, does not enable you to transcend the requirements of life. In fact, if anything, it makes the requirements of life more difficult. The need for resources becomes greater. The need for food becomes greater. You start having satellite establishments out there long ways away. That's a hard infrastructure to maintain. And they go on to say, for those of you who are still with me, freedom is rare in the universe. Just like it's rare in this world. Never take it for granted. I'd like to read you a couple of other quotes. We represent several races joined together in our small alliance to support the emergence of knowledge and wisdom in the universe. Now, who are these guys? Why would they care about us? I mean, we're sort of a third world planet, right? I mean, this is kind of the sticks, if you want to get down to it. We're not magnificent, we don't hang around our star cruisers and zip around the galaxy and, we're still down here whacking out in the bushes. They say that they underwent an intervention almost identical to ours by very similar, not the same, but very similar forces. And they had to overcome it. And so they were assisted by others, and now they are carrying on their assistance to us. They have no establishment here. They do not seek diplomatic relations with us. They are not interfering in human affairs. They have no interest in giving us technology. It's sort of the Star Trek notion, of non-interference. But however, they don't want to see this world become a client state to foreign powers. That somehow that would not be a good thing. They go on to say that humanity, if it can cross this threshold of emerging into a greater community of intelligent life, establish itself as a self-sufficient and free race in the universe, will have a lot to offer the universe around us. Primarily because of our spiritual development, which they say is greatly lacking in highly technological societies. Somehow the emergence extension of technology has a converse effect on spirituality. We've seen this in our own age as modems and computers and the internet sort of take the place of human communication and human bonding, and we begin to rely upon our gizmos and our gadgets to define who and what we are. Whereas people used to sit on the stoop on Saturday night and talk because there was no TV. So somehow the rise of technology is having a counterproductive effect on human relations. Oh yeah, you can talk to people through the internet, but does anyone know who you are? Does anyone care who you are? Do you mean anything in life? Well, 100 years ago you did, because the rest of the family needed you to get up in the morning and work the damn farm. Okay, or your tribe needed you, or somebody needed you, but today, hey, me and my computer, I'm doing fine. So there is a relationship between the decline of spirituality and the rise of technology. And that seems to be a universal thing. We come in our mission with a sense of urgency for humanity is way behind in its preparation for the greater community. For whatever reason, we're way behind. Government, missing pieces, social obsession, self-obsession, whatever it might be, we're not paying attention to this thing over here. And if we are, we're starry-eyed with it. We think it's cool. We think it's really cool. You live in a part of the galaxy that is quite inhabited. The environment that you will enter into is a very competitive one. You know, we're not out there in the sticks. We're not out in the far-flung backwaters of the galaxy. We're near major trade routes, and there's a lot of people looking at us. And they aren't very impressed with us either. We look chaotic, brutish, and we're destroying the property. So somebody wants to get in here and save this property before we take it down. And persuade us to let them do that. Now, some people think, because they're such believers in high technology, you know, Star Wars, the bigger laser cannons and all this jazz, that, you know, we have no defense against these extraterrestrials, right? They could just take us out. Not according to this information. Think about our own history. Such a great example. How do small forces overcome great forces? Not with advanced technology, not with superior numbers. How did Cortez, with his 800 men, overcome the most powerful nation in the Western Hemisphere? 2 million people and millions of slaves beyond that. Biggest army in the Americas. Dominant force, had conquered all these other tribes. How did he do it? Shoot in the air with his musket? I'm telling you, until the repeating rifle came along, the musket was not more advanced than a bow and arrow. By the time you've reloaded that thing, you've got half a dozen arrows in you. You get one shot. That's it. How does a small force, how does Pizarro with 168 soldiers overcome the Incas, who had an empire that stretched for 3,000 miles? Advanced technology? Superior numbers? Guile and, but this is most important, the weakness of the native force. The inability of the native force to recognize the intervention and to respond to it for what it was and to become united in responding to it. It is natural for you to hope and to expect that other races have outgrown deviousness, selfish pursuits, competition, and conflict. But alas, this is not the case. Greater technologies does not raise the mental and spiritual strength of individuals. The challenge for humanity is to understand who its allies really are and to be able to distinguish them from its potential adversaries. There are no neutral parties in the matter. In other words, extraterrestrials are not here on a holiday or a science experiment or just cruising around to check us out. Not to the degree that this intervention is occurring. And I call it an intervention because it's really not a visitation. We didn't lay out the welcome mat. We didn't establish the rules of engagement. When someone comes into your house, you establish the rules of engagement, right? You don't let people just sneak in, barge in. I hope you don't. You have some rules of engagement. You come into my house, you have my permission. I know who you are. I know why you're there. No such consent was ever gained from us. And we're so preoccupied and checked out that, geez, you could do all kinds of stuff in our house and we wouldn't even know it till later. This is from the second briefing. You are emerging into a mature and complicated set of circumstances. Here you cannot be like little children and believe and hope for the blessings of all whom you may encounter. Humanity is not united. It is broken apart. It is in contention with itself. This makes you extremely vulnerable to outside interference and manipulation. The visitors are confident that they can be successful, for so far they see that humanity has not yet mounted enough resistance to counteract their measures or offset their agenda. That stuff sounds pretty scary. It actually is scary. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the positive aspect of this. The Allies' message ultimately is one of hope and promise for humanity. They say the only thing that's going to unite humanity is the overshadowing of forces from the greater community. That may not do it either, but the only thing that could possibly do it is the intervention itself. What does the intervention require of us? Courage, trust, cooperation, dignity, all the kinds of things that culture and even religion has eroded away from the human soul. You know, often when people hear that we're being visited and we're not setting out the rules of engagement, they just drop the ball. Well, we can't do anything. They drop the ball. Why? Do nothing? Do you think 6 billion unruly, unpredictable, neurotic human beings aren't going to be a major thing to deal with? By a force that, one, doesn't want to destroy the resources, and two, needs a human workforce, a compliant human workforce? Why has human beings been studied for all this time? For those of you aware of the abduction phenomenon, why all this research? Why this genetic engineering? Why all this interest? Are we so fascinating? Are we like stellar in the universe? Are we like, why? Why would that kind of care be brought to a situation like this? Try to figure us out. Learn our strengths and weaknesses. Capitalize on our ignorance. Capitalize on our assumptions about life in the universe, which we tend to think is much more advanced than we are, because look at us. This has a lot of manifestations, and I don't want to talk too long because I'd like to interact with you all today, and perhaps in your questions I can begin to unfold this. It normally takes me about 2 hours to really lay out what the Allies are saying and to deal with the main questions, and also to tie it into the UFO phenomena as we know it and the historical record of the UFO phenomenon, which it correlates with very, very powerfully. But I do want to kind of bring my talk portion to a close with this idea of the call for human strength and dignity. How many of you have recently seen the movie The Two Towers, Lord of the Rings? Got any Lord of the Rings fans here? Well, it's interesting in that movie because you have this major threat out there in the East, and you have two major threats, but people aren't going to respond. It takes a spiritual agent like Gandalf to come in and get people to respond. He's not teaching them peace. He's not pacifying them. He's not saying, just be at peace and meditate and life will unfold. No, he's banging on there. He says, you got Saruman over here, you got Sauron over there. You better get it together. You got to get it together. Your elves, your dwarves, you got to get together. Doesn't matter your history, your issues. So when we bring that analogy back to our situation, what is the most fatal thing we could do to ourselves in the face of an intervention? Exactly what we're doing. Protracted war, protracted conflict, competition for religious supremacy, or religious values, taking each other out for resources. I'm not saying the extraterrestrial created that conflict, but it sure is benefiting them. Here in the United States, the one country in the world that could possibly respond or lead other nations to respond to the intervention, co-opted, sunken into protracted conflict in the Middle East, bring a great power down. Now this begins to shed some possible light on why the government is the way it is. If what I'm saying to you is true, and anybody in the government knows about it, and probably somebody does, the clerk doesn't know about it. Okay? Your senator probably doesn't know about it. These are frontline people that get elected they're not privy to inside information, usually. Now, the Allies don't talk about the government because they're not here. So they're not sneaking around listening in on, secret meetings of the government. Because they're out there. They're not here. They're planted out there somewhere watching. They're like spies. We need a spy. Because we don't know what's going on out there. We don't have a clue what's going on, 10 miles above our surface. We can only guess. Either is the only thing they say. There are people in the government who know about the intervention, who support it. There are people in the government who know about the intervention and who oppose it. So the ultimate emphasis of the Allies' humanity is not fear and all this kind of stuff. It's reality, honesty, and getting with the truth and being able to see clearly. People can be married a long time in a marriage that doesn't work, and finally one day say, this marriage doesn't work. And we are capable of living with things that don't work or being in denial for long, long periods of time. It's our survival mechanism wrongly implemented. Rightly implemented, we endure, we don't give up, we meet all obstacles. That's survival mechanism well applied. Wrongly applied is we live with things that don't work. And we adapt to that. That's our weakness. The extraterrestrial presence in the world today is not here to help us, it's to help themselves. And we're making it very, very easy for them to do that. And if what the Allies are saying ultimately is true, the responsibility really falls upon us. And they say this intervention isn't the last. If you can prevent this one, there'll be others. That little island paradise out there in the middle of the ocean is going to get visited repeatedly for the same reasons. Until the natives figure out how to deal with that. If they don't figure out how to deal with it, they're going to fall. Sooner or later. They're going to get seduced. They're going to get co-opted. And they'll be done in a very clever way because this is the way things happen in the universe between competing societies. They don't club each other over the head the way we do. They don't shoot at each other very often. That's dumb. Primitive races do that. Cunning, intelligence, persuasion. The ultimate weapon is to get the other person to submit willingly. You don't need to fly around and do Star Wars. But you do need to be very clever. I get accused of being fear-mongering and negative and unspiritual, and particularly in spiritual circles, because in spiritual circles where I function, people don't like to hear this kind of stuff. It kind of blows up their spiritual practice. It kind of makes their meditation more difficult. People in the UFO community don't like this, as I said, because it takes away the free canvas. It says make this whatever you want it to be. Because after this, if this is true, do we need to keep asking, are UFOs real? Regardless, okay, I'm going to talk about what they recommend to answer the fourth question. How do you prepare? We don't know. Throw rocks at them? Shoot missiles at them? We don't know. If their skill is intelligence and persuasion, our skill has to be intelligence too. And persuasion, at least over ourselves. You've got to fight fire with fire in this kind of realm. In the greater community, as in your world, the strong will dominate the weak if they can. This is the reality of life everywhere. So I know for centuries people have been looking to the heavens for salvation and a better life and greener pastures and enlightened beings and all this kind of stuff. But in reality, they're like us. Not just like us, but like us in their needs and in their problems, the basic problems of life. Competition, survival, resources, chaos, control. These are the problems that from a native tribe in the jungle to an intergalactic empire, has to deal with the same problems at their various scales. If humanity were well versed in greater community affairs, you would resist any visitation to your world unless a mutual agreement had been established previously. You would know enough not to allow your world to be so vulnerable. Wow! Is that fair? You come into my house only when I say you can come into my house. Hey, somebody's wandering around my house. Wonder who it is. Keep seeing them, you know. There they are right now. Well, doesn't seem to be a problem. You know. Realistic goals are awareness and education. This in itself would obstruct the visitor's agenda in the world. They're operating now with very little resistance.